This is the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra motherboard that you can see here on the microscope. It is water damage really bad. It actually came from this phone right here. There's corrosion everywhere. The board was in terrible condition. And now we got to take the extreme technique to get the data because I've tried everything to fix it, but the board is just beyond repair. So what we're going to do is we have a working Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra here. And what we're going to do is transplant the CPU, the UFS, the EEPROM pin code chip, and the RAM from this motherboard onto this working motherboard. This is a very advanced technique. I don't recommend you try this unless you practice it like 10 times and know the process, because once you damage these chips, it's game over. You cannot undo that damage and the data is gone. You cannot undo that. So first, what we want to do is just take a look at the corrosion this motherboard had. It is very extreme. It was everywhere. I've already tried everything to fix it. I cleared a bunch of shorts. I've removed a bunch of chips. But because this is a 2-layer sandwich, it added an extra layer of difficulty. The whole battery connector was just corroded away. These connectors were also in really bad shape. I even split the sandwich because there was even more corrosion inside. So I fixed some of that. I tried reballing it, but ultimately it's just not going to be fixable. This is what the housing looks like. You can see all that gunk, like that bright colors. Take a look at the connectors. This is the customer's original screen. So it's in really bad shape. The battery connector was just gone on the board side, and on this side is pretty bad shape. So yeah, this was really bad water damage. So one thing we've got to do for the CPU swap first is verify the model number. This is the international version of the S23 Ultra. There's a SM918B as in boy or Bravo, and then this is the donor SM918B as well. And this phone is fully working for data recovery purposes. This is a donor bought from Barbados, so it's pretty much untouched. The guy said he only messed with the microphone up here, which doesn't matter for data. As you saw in the beginning, it's fully working. So first, let's go through the prepping process. This is where we prep the donor board for the CPU swap. By the way, I will link to all my tools in the video description below. If there's something I missed, just let me know in the comments, and I'll link to that as well. Any of the things you buy through those links help out the channel as well, so make sure you guys are using those links. Share them with people as well. All right, so first we gotta get rid of the sticker. I like to peel up the sticker as one piece because it's just easier overall once you get it going. Although it looks like that strategy is not working. Let me try this corner. By the way, S23 Ultra USA model and international model are virtually the same, but they're not 100% the same. So you cannot transplant from one to the other. It has to be the exact same model number. I don't know what happens if you mismatch them. Probably won't boot or boot loop or something. If someone knows, let me know in the comments. But as far as I know, it's a bad idea to try it. Alright, so since I've already put some heat, it should make it easier to spread the flux onto the edges of the board. Now there's two ways to remove the shield: hot air or pliers or wire cutters. Either way is fine. I'm going to use hot air for this method. I'm going to turn on my fume extractor, which I will link down below, because in this step we create a ton of fumes. I'm using my Action T420D iron. Actually, my JVC tip for it just failed, so I'm using an aftermarket Action tip, which works fine too. but is also a little bit worn out already. I think because I do so many cleanings of underfill with the tip, it wears down fast. But the JVC tip feels like it lasted way longer. This one's already kind of rounded out. So what I'm putting is 1/38 ultra low melt solder. This allows the shield to desolder way faster than if you were just to try it as is. This solder is only useful for removing stuff. Do not use it to do normal soldering. Like if you want to solder an FPC, do not use this. The FPC will crumble and just fall apart. Very brittle. But works great for this purpose that I'm showing you right now. Alright. Next step is to actually remove the shield. I'm trying to strategize where should I come in. So let's do this. I'm gonna go 400 Celsius. You can see my temperature, my hot air on the top right. Make sure if you guys have any questions, that's where that is. Well, let me try this one actually. Just say hook blade. I'm just heating this corner. Oh, I feel an opening here. I'll just hook under there and blast it with heat. What we want is the shield to come off, but not the sandwich. Oh, it's not coming off. I don't think the low melt solder got in there on the solder joints. Let's try this. I'm gonna use my micro tip. See if I could add some solder in there. One of the downsides to using this solder, look how liquidy it is. So if you end up when you're lifting it, popping the shield, it can splash this solder everywhere and cause a problem. So let's keep that in mind. There's risks to all this. You know, I had to pay for the donor board and I can't risk damaging it because there's none. This model is not available in the US. I saw a few, but it was like $500. And that's not within the customer's budget. So I was able to find someone internationally to ship me one. Alright, so I'm gonna hook up, lifting up. I'm gonna put upward pressure. But yeah, because this is a one-time thing, meaning I have one chance to do this, I can't damage this donor. I'm gonna have to test as much as possible. And I'm just heating around the perimeter of the shield and trying to get this to loosen up. There it goes. It's about 70%, maybe 50% disconnected. How about now? There we go. It's almost there. Okay. So that chunk of the surface came off, but that's fine. We don't need that for this. Now I'm looking for splashes of that solder. Look, it's been already a few seconds since I took out the heat and this thing is still molten. So this is like really brittle stuff. So that's why you don't want to use it for an actual repair. You use this to remove stuff in the process of your repair. Well, there's a blob there, but technically it's not making contact with anything. But I don't like the look of it. Okay, so we removed the shield. This is the RAM. This chip is not paired. The one on top of the CPU is not paired. But this one is, and this is the important chip that a lot of people don't know about. This chip is part of the pin code. I don't know exactly what it does or anything, but if this chip is not the original one from the CPU and the UFS, the pin code will not work. So just keep that in mind. So if you lose it or damage it, then it's game over. Data is gone forever. All right, so now let me let it cool down. There's an easy way to cool it down is drip a bunch of ISO. And let's test that out. Essentially, we just want to make sure we didn't damage the board. Because what you don't want to do is you do the full CPU swap and then you try to boot it and then you don't know what happened. Alright, let's plug this in. 5 volts. Samsung logo, 1.5 amps. Looks like we're still good. So we didn't cause any new problems. The donor's still good. Although the next step, we probably won't be able to test it after that, which is remove the CPU and all that. And those. Oh, there it was just lagging a little bit. There you go. So let's check about phone. Here you go. The demo phone, S23 Ultra, 918B, and no MEI. This is because the demo phone is designed for display, but as far as I know, all the hardware is still there. So there's a way to convert this to non-demo phone, but that's not what I need it for. All right, so remember, this is the donor. Usually I label the donors and the customer's board, but so obvious this is the donor because it's not destroyed. There's no need to worry about keeping track of which one's which. All right, I'll put it on the board holder. All right, so we got to get rid of a few of these chips. So let's just mark this one. So there's the orientation dot. I'm gonna mark a little X over here. Alright, so just get rid of it. This is the donor. We don't need this one. All the donor chips we're gonna get rid of. Maybe I'll save. Maybe I'll use the RAM from this phone because the other one looks pretty bad as far as water damage. By the way, the water damage is so bad, there's a chance data is not recoverable just because it's all over the CPU as well. I guess we'll see once we remove the CPU. So hopefully it's not a problem. But it's one of those things, it's a several hour job and basically the only way to know is to just try it and see what happens. You know, you got to be careful who you send your phones for data recovery. There's a lot of techs out there who are not experienced in this, but they try them anyway just because they see a lot of people on YouTube do them, and it's not good for the customer. They won't practice. All right, this one getting rid of. Now we're gonna prep. So now I'm using regular 183 solder tester. I'll link to this down below. Let's do UFS first. This is the UFS. That's what it has. It's kind of like the hard drive. All the data stored in here, but it's encrypted. What that means is all the data jumbled with a special key that is in the CPU. So you have to have both together. One has the data, one has the key, and they talk to each other to allow you to access the data. What I did there was just wick away that entry point for my spatula that I've shaved down, and then I'm gonna increase the temp a little bit. I noticed even the small IC was a little difficult to remove with my highest preset setting. So that basically means this is going to be difficult as well. So might as well turn up the temperature, because the other one needed a ton of heat. This one will need even more because of the larger chip. Well, actually, it's coming off way easier than expected. So I think this temp might be a little too hot, but let's try it. There you go, look at that. Did a kickflip. Alright, well, because we're removing chips, I'm just going to use this temperature. At this point, if we test, we should get Qualcomm loader mode, or QD loader mode, or something like that. Basically, look at this, clear underfill. So one thing about this procedure is that there's a bunch of this glue that is gluing the chips down, and this is where the technique and skill come into play, because if you don't know how to deal with it, you're going to damage the chips when you're fighting this underfill. You know, some people say I make it look easy, and that's because this is what I do all day. Alright, I gotta find the orientation on this chip. Let me see if I could clear this thermal paste out. I think it's this one here. There you go, see that dot? We gotta orient everything in that side. So I'm gonna mark an X here. The UFS we don't need to, because there's a built-in orientation dot, which is the pads themselves, has a unique pattern. Technically CPU does as well. Oh, you know what? Hope I have the stencil for this. Let's see. We'll find out. It looks just like the Qualcomm CPU, but we'll find out shortly. Alright, so I put on flux because we want to be able to, there's not that much underfill here, so we want that flux to help us. Like I'm doing a slicing motion. so I can get chunks of that underfill out. And then the flex will help kind of flow the solder joints for easy RAM removal. You know, one thing about this whole process is what you can do, if you don't know if you mess up your donor, you can always put the chips back and see what happens. Okay, I'm gonna add a little more flux. Now sometimes you do the whole process, it goes smooth, but it doesn't boot. And you're like wondering what happened. So you redo the reball, still nothing. You know, everything checks out. So then one thing you can do is just put all the chips, the original chips, back from the donor, and that'd be a good way to confirm, is the issue the chips you installed or the donor board went bad. Every once in a while, donor boards, you know, something happens and it just doesn't want to boot. Alright, so I've put the RAM in a designated spot for keeping, safe keeping. Basically my donor chips that I don't need, I just toss them in a pile. The chips I need to save, I toss them in a separate designated spot here on my bench. That way I'll never mix them up. The last thing you want to do is mix up these chips if you're not paying attention or being mindful of what you're doing. Alright, so this is the top of the CPU. For this case, this is a donor, so we don't even need to do anything. But for the customers' chips, we do have to prep the board. So there's a big opening here on this top right. What I'm doing is just kind of rubbing in there, see if I could feel the solder melting. Like right now I could see that? Yeah, it just slides through. So we're just slicing through not only the solder joints, but also the underfill. Oops, I bumped that cap. Alright, and then you gotta make sure you heat evenly across the whole thing. There's an entry point here, so let me get a little entry point in here as well. Look at that. CPU went flying. Alright, so this CPU, we're not gonna keep. I'm gonna put it in the pile. And then I did bump these two together, which I don't know if they need to be touching, but let's correct that real quick before I forget. And now my workbench is full of chunks of underfill and thermal paste, which is not fun. Then it makes a mess everywhere. Alright, so let's see if we can get this. There we go. That was easy. Alright, let's see. Did I knock off any components? Rip any pads? Short anything out with bridges with these little solder balls? Everything looks fine and dandy. Alright, now it's time to prep these pads. We're going to use a ton of flux. And we're going to use a ton of low melt 138 solder. Ultra low melt. Basically, we want to make it super easy to wick. Huh, my tip is failing, I think. iron is beeping. Let me clean the tip. It's weird. I'm pretty sure I started using the tip like 4 days ago. And I've already destroyed it. But basically, I do a lot of this where I'm prepping the surface of a board that has a bunch of underfill, and it wears on the tip really fast. What's crazy is this is generating so much smoke. I think my fume extractor is struggling to pick this all up. Alright. Oh, look at that. I got all the pads ran over. Basically, this low melt makes it super easy to wick flat. Alright, take a look. Let's see if this iron tip holds up. Oh, like butter. This is where a lot of people can go wrong. They don't know how to wick something with heavy thermal mass like this, and we'll rip a bunch of pads and destroy the donor board or the customer board. They're trying this on the customer's phone. You know, also another thing to consider is for trying this, once you try this, you're on your own. There's like not much you can do after as far as troubleshooting or solving a phone that won't boot after CPU swap. So you now introduce a really big variable, which is a CPU. As you can see, there's a ton of pads here. A lot of these are individual lines that do very unique things. If one of those functions on the CPU fails, it can cause the phone to not power on, or even boot loop, or cause all kinds of weird stuff. That's why one of the biggest pet peeves is when someone says they did a CPU swap, now the phone is not doing, is doing, you know, X, Y, or Z, and it's like, well, it's good luck figuring out what that is, because now you've, like, is it the donor board that went bad? Is it the CPU that got damaged? Is it the UFS? Is it the, you know, who knows what you damaged? There's a lot of things that can go wrong in this whole process. Did you rip pads that you didn't fix? You know, if you're doing this, you should know how to troubleshoot from this point. If anything goes wrong, if you have to ask, you probably shouldn't have been trying a CPU swap. All right, that looks decent. Let me wick these as well. And the reason why you want to wick it is because these chips are so big. Very little room for error as far as the install. So wicking it allows for a really good placement as well as alignment, because you don't have the variable of how much solder is on the board. Because when you reball the chip, you have a controlled amount of solder on there, because the stencil helps you do that. But when you prep these pads, like if you just add solder to them, you don't know how much solder each pad has. It might be uneven. Alright, so let's clean this up. And this as well. So while it's still hot, you can scrub this flux away, and then you get most of it, and then you come in and finish off the job, any of the debris. And then lastly, scrub it to knock loose any other remaining chunks of underfill. And then soak it a little more, drop this on there, hold it down with your fingers and scrub it. You can see there's this stuff here. This can hinder the install of the chip because there's some height to it. So what I like to do is gently scrape it flat, then scrape it out. I'm surprised the CPU didn't have way more underfill. Usually they're filled a lot, and you don't know, each board is slightly different. So some have a lot more, some have a lot less. Also, you pulling the chip might cause the underfill to stick to the chip versus sticking to the board. So, you know, sometimes it's a lot of work to clean up. Sometimes it's like really easy. Alright. I see here's some here as well. I'm going to get rid of anything the chip can possibly bump into. These chunks right here. No, I think that's most of it. Now there's some right here. Look at that. Alright, that's good. You can see all the pads are wicked flat. There's a few missing pads, but just based on how they look like NC, not connected, or basically blank pads. There's no circuitry on it. If there's circuitry on it, then you would see like little dots of copper, like the connection. And that's how you prep a donor board. We got the 3 spots. This one containing 2 chips, and then the other 2. So totally in the 4 chips we need to install. Now we gotta pull the chips from. So this I'm gonna put out to the side. Now we're gonna get the customer's board with their data, and because I already split it, it's just gonna be the top board. So it's gonna make it easier to work on because the thermal mass has changed. Although I think I need a different board holder to hold it better. This is a tool jig. I will link this down below. I have multiple, as you can see, 2 of them. They're really nice. Highly recommend this board holder for pretty much everything. Alright, so like I said, that chip is what we need for data. So we can't lose this one, so let's get it off and in a safe spot first. In the past, I've had these chips fly away from the heat trying to remove the CPU, so I'll remove this one first and install it last. Oh, wrong temperature. There you go. Alright, so I'm just heating it, trying to monitor it, seeing when it starts moving. As you heat it from the top down, it shouldn't fly away. But as you see underneath, it has a lot of, oh, here it goes. The reason why this flies away is because look how much space there is from the pads. Oops, I was out of focus. From the pads to the, like, there's a lot of room, so that catches the air and makes it fly. Alright, so that's the chip. I'm gonna save it here next to me. Let's save the, or let's get the UFS. And we'll also check this as well on our programmer. This is our JCU15, I believe. And let me wick this entry point. Alright, I'll just check in and see there's no underfill on the sides. You know, one thing about the UFS, it's very heat sensitive, so don't use too much heat. Don't bend it. Now this one feels like there's way more underfill on it. I'm doing like stabbing, slicing motions so I can penetrate through the solder balls and release it from the underfill. And there we go, we have it removed. So we'll check this in a bit. Let's keep removing the chips, because while the board is still hot, let's just keep it going. Alright, so this is the RAM chip. I'm gonna save it, but it's not necessary. Because from the side view, it kind of looks like there's a bunch of corrosion. Oh man, it smells too. So I'm just kind of slicing through. See some solder balls flying out. Let me see that good. Go through the different angles. There it goes. I'm gonna save it, but put it a little further away, so I know it's kind of like my backup. Here's some of the underfill. This is like glue. Clear, and it stinks too, by the way. I'm not a fan of the Samsung underfill smell. Alright, so this is, because this is the CPU we want to save, we need to prep it now because it will have no other chance. So essentially, while it's installed, it's kind of like our jig that's holding the CPU in place for us to work on it. Let's run over all the pads, our iron, making sure all the pads take solder while simultaneously cleaning off the underfill. Alright, then very quickly, let's wipe this down so you can see a little better. Alright, you see there's chunks of underfill down here. So let's get rid of that. A little bit here. Everything else looks good. I'm gonna wick this flat now so that we can have the top side prepped and ready to go for afterwards. So we're just gonna wick it. Let's clean off excess flux. Now there's one pad that's questionable right here. It looks like it's just a little bit of oxidation on there. So we'll just scratch it a little bit. That'll be fine for later. Alright, now same process to remove the CPU. Alright, so there's still a lot of flux left over from earlier. And making sure there's no underfill in between the CPU. That should be fine. So same process, just kind of see if I can enter my tool. The key step is to heat evenly the whole CPU. Make sure you have a really large nozzle. I'm using a 13 millimeter bent nozzle for my add-in hot air station. This is the ST862. You can see how my blade is able to slice through a big portion of the board. And you rotate. So I can enter on this side. Let's rotate on this side as well. There's an opening here. The nice thing about this model is how many openings there are. A lot of times there's just really tight around it where like resistors and whatnot are all what else? Now let's put this aside. So this is the customer's original board, and now time to clean these chips. I guess I just start with the CPU. So this CPU is gonna get really messy. There's a ton of underfill on here. I'm gonna stink up the office. I like to use 138 low melt on this as well, just to prep it, wick it, and then we reball it with 183. So this is just makes it easier. Let me know in the comments what other videos do you guys want to see on the channel, what repairs, what techniques, and I'll see if I could squeeze one in. You know, these videos take a ton of time to make, so recently I haven't had much time, but I've been wanting to do a newer model CPU swap. So if you guys need your data recovered, send me a message. We're in Las Vegas, Nevada. We offer mail-in service from across the world. We've gotten devices from many countries. That's not an issue. We just keep in mind, you know, shipping is going to be expensive, but you know, some people find their data is worth, you know, every penny that they're going to pay, and we have the experience, as you're watching, to do these. We're typically what people, when other places fail, we're typically the place people come to. But I don't really like that. Usually when other places fail, it means they tried a bunch of shenanigans and destroy the board. It does lower the chances of data recovery, to be honest, when someone's already tried working on the board. Alright, so now you can see all these little yellowish stains. That's all the underfill that came off the CPU. It's very messy, and I hate it. It stinks. Alright, so we got a lot of oxidized pads. That's those gray ones. The solder will not take. So what I like to do is add some low melt solder on here. This is solder from a sandwich reball I did earlier for an iPhone 13 no service. And you know, this paste cannot be reused after a few hours. So I like to use it for this. So basically coat the chip. Then we're gonna go really low airflow and temp to like higher. It's kind of like a reballing it without a stencil, in the hopes that a lot of the paste does grab onto the pads. It does get some on the back as well, but that's fine. Minimal on the back is fine. So let's see, let's run over everything. And it definitely increased the number of pads that were not soldered. And then let's see, let's try to wick it flat and see what happens. Sometimes the wicking part is what allows us to fix the pad as well. By the way, those little chips that are under, they look like capacitors. They're not needed for data recovery. So you can just get rid of them. Makes it easier to do all this. If you leave them on there, you have to kind of work around them and they get in your way. And you eventually bump them anyway, so I just get rid of them right off the bat. I've tried keeping them. Like I said, it's a pain. You end up bumping into them, so not worth the hassle when it works fine for data afterwards. If it's not for data, well, that's on you. Oh man, this tip is destroyed. Alright, time to clean this and then I'll switch tips because I don't want to keep using that nasty tip. Also, the flux kind of burned up a little bit and it was like burnt into the pads. So I'm trying to scrub it to get rid of some of that yellowing. But keep in mind, if you use a Q-tip, it is abrasive. Like if you do this enough, you will scratch the chip. Like if you just rub the chip enough, and you don't want to do that. Just be careful. There's a lot of underfill that kind of overflowed, so I like to hold the chip sideways and kind of shave the edges down. And while we're here, let's clean up the back. So this side, I'll wick the back later. Let's see. Alright, actually, let me just wick it now. Let's get that out of the way. Oh, let's see. Alright. Alright. There's a lot of pads here that look like they might be ripped, but they're not. They're just oxidation. So take a look. For example, all these can be restored by just scraping out a little bit. You try reballing over it. Usually works, but sometimes doesn't. So let me just scrape out a little bit. Because once the solder gets in there, it kind of overtakes the pad and fixes it. But you need a little bit exposed. So it's a good amount. Usually the darker ones are the hardest ones to get solder on, so it's good to scrape out a little bit. Let's see. How much more do I got? There's different techniques to deal with this. I just prefer to do this. It takes a few minutes and it's safe in that you can't really mess this up. Another technique that I used to use a lot was you kind of sandwich one chip on top of the other with flux and thermal paste, not thermal paste, solder paste in between, and then you hot air it and you kind of scrub it together. I've had a few times where like it scratched the chips a little too much. Usually it was fine, but you know, sometimes things didn't work and you're not sure if that was that or something else caused it. I feel like I got it all. I see one pad from over here. This pad over here stands out. But the rest are kind of... Alright, I think that should be good. This is prepped-ish chip. You know what, I'm gonna put this aside. Let's clean the rest of the chips. This is the RAM from the donor. I think I can still reuse that tip, especially if I'm gonna destroy it. Might as well finish it off here. Just run your iron. Knife tip is a godsend. Ever since I switched to this, I don't know how I did any repairs before that. This one's heavily oxidized, just like the CPU. So let's see. Maybe if I wick it, it will solve it. Not really. Although wicking also clears underfill. Alright, well, that's clean enough for me. I'm going to clean the sides. Apparently the back too, or the top. Okay, and then let's prep the UFS. This is like the NAND hard drive, NAND flash, I don't know, storage, SSD, call it what you want. It's what has the data in it. You can read this chip, actually with the program we're about to use. You cannot do anything with that data. It's not readable. I mean, you could pull the data, you just can't access it because it's all jumbled. So that's why we gotta fix the phone, turn it on, unlock it with the PIN code to get data. And after all that, you gotta make sure it stays on and is stable. You know, sometimes you get phones that turn on, but they're not stable. They'll restart or they'll overheat. The USB will disconnect. You know, all kinds of weird problems. So this is why data recovery is expensive, because we got to master all those repair skills plus more, versus a standard repair shop. They typically just do some basics and then they kind of throw in the towel. Probably got a good, before the CPU swap, have probably a good 8 hours into this phone. So this data recovery job should pay off. I mean, this swap should pay off because I need to recoup all that money due to time lost. Worst case, I'll make that money from this video and getting more customers. But we'll see. I get more customers if this is a success, more subscribers, more comments. If it fails, everyone's gonna be laughing at me. So I cannot fail. We gotta make this work. I have a feeling this is a 1 terabyte chip because of how thick it is. Alright, now to reball it. Alright, so one technique to reballing an IC is using this clean cloth. This is like a fabric material. It's not flimsy, it's a little like fibrous versus like a cloth style. I don't know how to describe it, but it's different than this one. This is more like a microfiber cloth versus this one is more like a paper towel, I guess. But it's really nice for reballing because it kind of allows the chip to sink into it. It doesn't burn up, and it's really thick. And then here's the stencil we're gonna use, the MOE. I don't know how to pronounce that. For SM8550. That's the CPU for this Samsung. Here it is, SM8550 Qualcomm. So luckily, there's not a different version CPU, which is kind of common. You know, Exynos versus Qualcomm. I guess for S23 series, they went with the same chipset. All right. So for this, we're gonna use 183 solder. This is we're gonna use this one right here. So I'll link this down below in the video description. It's 183 Mechanic XG50. I'm gonna scoop up a bit like that. And before I reball, I'm gonna press this into the cloth to kind of dry it out and make it nicer for the reball process. If you don't do this, it's gonna be a little too watery and you're gonna get a bad reball. All right, lined up. Let's spread this paste. Careful with this process. If you don't do it right, you can be moving the stencil around or the chip around and it won't be a good reball. So let's see if I did it right. I feel like we're very close to the finish line. It's a lot faster than it feels a lot faster than the last few CPU swaps I did. But yeah, it's crazy how time flies. And I'll be doing this and then I go check the time, and it's been like a few hours. I see some pads did not make good connection. So down here, I'm gonna add some flux. See if I can make this work. I'm going to reheat it with focusing on this bottom right corner where it looks like solder balls did not flow into the pads. A little better. Let's see, let me add. Some more flux. Now for this step, we gotta get it out of the clean cloth so it doesn't burn it. The direct heat will burn it, but if you are reballing, it won't burn it. Alright, look at that. It actually flowed those balls right into those pads. So you have it. Drop a shiny solder balls in the comments if you are enjoying this video. And if you have nothing else to comment, you need an idea. If you have a question, it's probably better. I try to respond to every question as long as it's something I know the answer to, or I don't have to write a book to respond. There's this simple answer. Drop it in the comments and I will answer it. Alright, next up, let's do the RAM. Let's see. The RAM. Over here. Now for the RAM, there's two things you can do. You can do low melt, 138, so ultra low melt, or just keep using the same 183. And let's see, I find this 183 paste works so much better. Even so, the benefit of using 138 is that if you have to split the RAM, it'll melt way easier than the solder for the CPU. So then you could basically rework the RAM without disturbing the CPU. But what I don't like about the low melt solder paste, like I mentioned earlier, it's very brittle and it's very weird, like the way it's the texture and everything of it. So I kind of don't like that. So I'm gonna just use the same solder paste I used for the UFS for the. Oh, you know what? I should have checked the UFS. If that thing's dead, then it's pretty much game over. Although, probably worth just finishing the job just to confirm. But yeah, let's just keep going. Alright, formed all the solder balls, but I see a lot of solder balls are not making contact with the pads. So if you look closely, you can see, well, I don't know if you guys can see. Alright, let me add some flux to the sketchy areas in hopes that we'll fix it. Also, what we can do is just kind of spread the flux around. And we could also reball on top of this. So anytime you have issues with the reball, like uneven solder balls or anything, just reball one more time right on top. That's the second layer, third layer if you have to. Oh, look at that. That's way cleaner now. Alright, just to be sure, I actually did reball this evenly. What I'm gonna use my blade and shave across. Like that. And then reball right over. Alright, so we're just gonna scrape. One thing you can do also is wipe down the chip with the stencil with a clean cloth. I will also kind of pack in that paste in there and make it a really nice reball. There it goes. And it looks pretty clean. I was actually expecting a bunch of solder paste in between the pads, but I don't see any. Let me switch tweezers. I'm going to reflow it as is, and then we'll add flux. If we add flux now, any paste that might be in there might bridge stuff. Just trust me on this one. After you pull the chip off the stencil, do not add flux. Just reflow it as is. Otherwise, you can potentially cause bridges. What I like to do. So now we have a layer of flux. Reflow it one more time. Back, I'm gonna rub on the clean cloth and put that away. Clean the stencil. That's a lot of gunk in each hole. I was able to hopefully clean that up. Alright, the next one is the CPU. Now this is going to be a lot harder with how large the chip is. Also, this is a 2D stencil, meaning it's going to slide around and such. But if you do this right, it shouldn't be a problem. If you cannot reball with the 2D stencil, you shouldn't be reballing. Now I do see some stencils a little dirty. Some paste in here. So what we can do, reflow this paste so we clear it out. Alright, so first thing you do is reflow it. Add a little bit of flux. I keep saying I'm going to switch this tip, but go ahead and wick the stencil. It got a little messy, but a little bit more work. We definitely oh no. And scrape. Scrape, scrape. Oh, I have like gunk in each hole. I think the wick I used was dirty and it kind of made it worse. Let's see. This is not fun. That was my mistake. I'm trying to rush it because it's getting really late here. And time for Mimi's. But once you start a project like this, I cannot end it. And the project is me filming. I can't, because once tomorrow starts, then it's all the normal business stuff that takes my time. By the time basically I'm constantly interrupted all day long. So it makes it hard to do anything that takes a long time. Let's see, is that everything? Oh man. Alright, well, hope you guys learned from my mistake. Make sure your wick is clean before you try to wick the stencil, so you don't burn some underfill into the stencil holes like I did. Also, we gotta get a little more paste on our spatula. So this is a big chip because we're also gonna use one of these. So this spatula is larger and allows us to apply it onto a chip easier. This one's easier to scoop in from here. And what we gotta do is dry this out as well. You always want to dry out your paste. So basically, you want to press it into the cloth until it no longer leaves any stains, or at least minimal. You want to kind of roll it in to itself. All right. Now we're going to scrape it on there. Alright, so now we have chunks there, right, lined up. Let's apply the paste. We're probably gonna have to reball this a few times to get it perfectly even. The goal is, see how I can one swipe pretty much get the whole CPU? It's kind of what we want. Also, the first few times is really just to get solder on all the pads, and then we'll deal with getting a perfect reball. So these go really slow, kind of far away. Some of the solder paste is oozing out. Just fine. Like I said, we'll get the perfect reball after we just get solder on all the pads. Also, it's fresh paste, so it tends to be the wateriest. So there's that. Alright. And it looks legit. But one way to know is if we shave it, how many of the pads do we shave? In theory, if they're all even, they should all shave evenly. But it's not. You can see how some are not even being touched. That's because they're too short. Some have a flatter head, so to speak. Like the tops are flat, so what we're gonna do is just reball one more time right on top. Not a problem. As long as you don't run out of paste, it shouldn't be a problem. And on this try, let me wipe down the top of the chip with a clean cloth. Let's give this another try. So in theory, it looks like all the balls are sucked into pads. So now in this second try, we're basically going to try to even out all the solder balls and get a good reball, good even reball. Right. So the goal is to make this reball nice and even. Kind of looks like some of the middle ones are a little bigger than the other ones, but you know what, let's see, let's pop this out. Okay, from the side. Oh, it looks pretty even to me. There's like one random solder ball here that didn't attach. Most of that attached. Alright, so I kind of re-hot this CPU. I will now add some flux. Alright. Reflow all this, and I think I see a problem. There's a ball here, it kind of stands out. It might be a little sunken in more than the others. Oh man, I'm like debating, should I go check the ZXW, see if that pad is just ground or what, or just leave it. Well, let's check. Alright, let's take a look. This is the S23 Ultra CPU. This is the pad in question right here. So if you look at the chip itself, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 right here, this top row, and that is this one here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so that's a ground pad. I'm just gonna leave it. I don't want to risk messing up anything else. The reball looks very clean. Besides that, I was able to notice that because when I was reflowing the flux, I can see like this little divot on that area, so that's why it stood out. Let's see. Alright, let's clean up the stencil. All right, and then lastly is the, I call it the pin code IC. Some people call it EEPROM. I think pin code IC just makes more sense because everything works without it, just no pin code. So the EEPROM, it shouldn't, at least on iPhones, with no EEPROM, it doesn't boot. This one boots. I actually had one case come in from UK. It was actually the exact same model, S23 Ultra, with the last quote-unquote data recovery lab. They literally ripped this chip off the board, trying to remove that shield that we removed at the beginning. They did the pry method and pried off this chip and all the pads off of it. And that's basically how I discovered that this was required for data. And look, the stencil has it. Right there. Customer tried, I was able to get the phone online because I connected it through Ethernet. And the customer was able to see it on his Samsung, Find My Samsung website. But no matter what, anytime I try to unlock it remotely, I would not go through. It kept failing, no matter what. Tried everything, I just wouldn't. He would see my location, but he wouldn't be able to unlock it because this chip was missing. So just keep that in mind. If you damage or lose this chip, that's game over. So I reballed it. Reflow one more time. Luckily, the chip is not very fragile, as some other EEPROMs like on iPhones. So that's good. All right, let's clean that off as well. All right, next step, UFS. Actually, let's clean it. It has flux all over it. We can't read it on the programmer with all this flux. This is a BGA153 UFS chip. Majority of Androids use this pad layout. All right, so for this programmer, we gotta have power to it through a charger. 5 volt, 2 amps, and then separately you need USB connection to the PC. So we have 2 cables into it. Third, we gotta pop this open. We have a BGA153, which is labeled here. Orientation dot goes towards the top. Let's pop it in there, close it up. It beeped. That means it detected something. And then the JC Repair System software, we will, I think it froze, so give it a second. All right, looking good. So you can see it has detected the chip, the maker, the model, the size, and yeah, 1 terabyte, 953 gigs. Here on the right is all the partitions. Read all this. So lifetime of the chip is good. So the chip is not dead, and it should be doable. Now, if you want to do it even further to see if the chip is good, what you want to do is do what is called here, you select all. Wait, hold on. Now select all here, and then click backup bin. This will copy the whole chip into your computer. You cannot do anything with that file, but if it's able to read the whole chip, then you're good. I had a case where it was detecting, but no matter what, it wouldn't boot. And sure enough, when I tried to read it, it would fail constantly, like right away. So it was, this partition table was able to be detected, but the actual data was not readable. The chip was internally bad. So now that we got all the things ready, what I like to do is CPU first, RAM, UFS, lastly the pin code chip. So let's go through that process and wrap this baby up. All right, so what we're gonna do is put little dots of flux. Too much coming out. Cross it. Basically, we want some flux here so it sticks the chip down. If you don't put this, it's gonna slide around. All right, so CPU will go like this. We know because the pattern of the caps below and the marker we did here with the arrow we have here. And I'm gonna start off with the same low airflow and line it up with the arrows on the corner. There's an arrow down here. There's none on top, but I think I have a pretty good eyeball for this. By the way, there's like a little chunk of solder there on the top side of the board, which we can fix easily once we install the chip. What I like to do is start low heat, low airflow, and basically try to slow cook this without it sliding around. I think it's floating on the flux. So I took the heat away and I pressed down so I could physically make contact with the board and no longer be floating on top, like hydroplaning, so to speak. Although it might still kind of float and slide around, see? There's too much flux in there. Well, a little too late now. Just proceed. I could also hold it. That's a lot harder because you gotta keep your hands steady. Let's see, maybe I could make it happen. Come on, let's go. I'm paying attention to that little arrow on the bottom right. If I see the chip moving relative to that, then I know something's happening. Let me see, let me try to bump it. So that pad right here is messing with me. All right. Well, the chip is definitely grabbing onto the board. And now I just gotta heat it enough so it flows and lets me bump it. Get that surface tension to do his magic. Alright, I'm gonna bump up the temperature a little bit. Whoa, there's actually a lot more than a little bit, but there goes, bumped it. Alright, to fix this, a few ways. Let's first add some flux to it. I'm gonna rub my iron on the wick in hopes that it transfers the heat. Alright, well, that looks not good. Alright, let's swap out this tip and put the tip of the iron. It already has a hole in it. Now you can see the gap. Can't believe this lasted like 3 days. 4 days. Alright, this is the new tip, JBC. Got it from Mobile Centrics. It is a C210-018. Supposedly genuine. This is what this tip looks like. It's a little bit of solder there. Yep. Well, it's leaving behind solder. Alright, well that should be fine. Alright, I don't want to keep messing with that and make it worse. Alright, that shouldn't impede anything. Let's do the same thing, little dots of flux. The chip itself has flux too. Here's the chip. The arrow is this way. Okay. Alright, so what I'm doing is trying to align it to these little gold lines here. Kind of hard to see because of the reflection of the light. But go back to lower temp. New RAM. And we basically go slow and steady. Okay, so we're gonna keep heating very slow. It's gonna take some time. We're looking for the flux to like ooze out the sides. And in theory, that means it worked. Although taking a lot longer than I feel it should. Let me bump it. Nope, I still feel it solid. Oh, here it goes. I see flux coming out now. Yep, here comes the flux. Oozing out the sides. I can see some here on the right side. Look at that. You bump it, snaps back. Good. Next one is UFS. This one doesn't have flux on the chip. Also like to squeeze some out so it has a path to kind of leak out, so I know. I see the dot is this one down here. So it's like this. Basically the extra pad in there is what gives me the orientation. This UFS is huge, so I might need extra heat. Not sure if this setting right here will work. Let's try it. Oh man, it's getting late. I feel my eyes getting heavy. Alright, so once we install this chip, it's pretty much, it works or it doesn't. And let's see what happens. Comment below your prediction, even though we could just fast forward and predict it correctly. I bumped it, and that triggered the melting point, I guess. Yeah, it's installed. It's bumping, it's flowing. Oh no, I have one more chip. A pesky little pin code chip. Now this one's tricky because it can fly away. Hopefully it doesn't. Orientation dots. Oh man, there's like some hairs on it too. Okay, orientation dot here. Also, because the pads are so inside the chip, it's like hard to even stand up the chip over the pads. It's like teeter-tottering. But yeah, you save this chip for last because you might blow it away doing all the other work. Alright, let's see. How's it going? I never know if this chip is installed right. See how it's like teeter-tottering? Alright, like it's bouncing. Alright, I would say that's installed. Orientation dot is towards that little scratch I did on there. Is correct. Now we wait. We give it a minute or two to cool down. What I have to do is, it's been a good amount of time. All the solder should be solid by now. And adding ISO and like blowing on it like this will help cool it down way faster than just waiting. Plus, I don't get to disturb the board or anything. Board feels cool to the touch now. Let's take a look from the side. Can we see if we did any mistakes? I see the solder balls under the CPU look good. I kind of see the solder balls under the inside the RAM. It all looks aligned. UFS. That looks kind of, can see in there a little bit. How about the pin code chip? Hard to see in there, but everything looks good. All right, so let's see, is it gonna work? All right, so let's play some suspenseful music. That is what is it called? Copyright free, royalty free. Because I don't feel like paying for music. Although one time I used royalty free music and it's still, YouTube still flagged me, so there's that. All right. Let's go ahead and plug it into charge. What do we get? What do we get? Oh, charging logo. Good sign of basically 5 volts, 1.5 amps. We get the fast spinning circle. We're probably good. We do. All right, prompt to boot. So I have to press the board into the housing because this is a contact-based power button. What happens? Oh, there goes Samsung Galaxy. That's fantastic news. Well, so far so good. You know, things look promising so far. You know, if you follow these steps, you shouldn't have mixed up any of the. So as long as we have the right chips in there, it should boot up and work fine. And then we can pull the data through a smart switch backup. I'm gonna prepare his external drive. I noticed too, after a swap, it usually takes forever to finally boot. So I have to unlock. All right, let me type in the pin code. Looks like pin code's working. Look at that, it seems to be working. Let's go to settings. I like to scroll down to device care, storage, and see how much data is on here so I know what to expect. 724. Look at that. Look how much data is on here. 700 gigs plus. 300 gigs of videos, 90 of images, audio files. Oh man, that's a lot of audio, documents. All that is going to be able to be recovered using one of these. Now, let's see. All right, so the trick here is we need a hub. So we need to plug in the hub. This is for charging and this is for data. So I'll plug in the charging hub. I'll plug in the external drive. This should detect the drive. Yeah, USB storage added. And go back. So go to smart switch, external storage transfer. I'm gonna do USB storage. And then this is where we back up all the user data into this hard drive, or whatever you want to call it. And then once this is all done, you can plug this into the new Samsung phone, go into the settings, go into the same smart switch, and select it to restore, and it'll just import everything. And basically, it's like if nothing ever happened. It'll transfer all your pictures, videos, contacts, text, notes, documents, audio, all that stuff, including your secure folder as well. And it'll merge it into your existing new phone. Unlike iPhones, you cannot merge data that we recover. You gotta, like, we can get you the backup file, which means you have to restore it into a new phone, which requires you to factory reset it and then restore this data. Whereas Samsung, it merges it. So I feel like Smart Switch is a much better system than Apple's iTunes backup. So I mean, this looks like it's working and it's gonna be ready to go. Customer is gonna be really happy. We're gonna, once we do all this, we keep a copy of this data on our computer just in case anything happens after we ship. And then worst case scenario, look at that, 569 gigs. I'm gonna click next. I'm gonna start the backup. One downside is WhatsApp is not backed up, but yeah, I'll go ahead and there you go. I'm gonna leave this overnight, and tomorrow we'll have good news. So if you guys enjoyed this video, if you guys learned anything, let me know down below in the comments. Get yourself one of these t-shirts if you want to support the channel. Make sure you guys subscribe to my locals community. I'm going to be doing a live stream of the iPhone 16 Pro teardown, so make sure you guys are joining us. That's pretty much it for me today. All the links to everything is down below, and if you need your data recovered, go to my website, which you'll see there on the bottom left of the screen. See you guys in the next one.